Hey everyone, and welcome back to the OurMFC channel. It's Jordan here, and we're joined with another special guest today, Stuart Quigley. How are you doing, Stuart?
Yeah, perfect. It's absolutely great to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Honestly, mate, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. It really is. And obviously, you'll see that Matty's here as well this week. Couldn't make it last week, but yeah, he's back today. How are you doing, Matty?
I'm doing all right, mate. Looking forward to this. Let's get it going.
We shall. So for people that don't know yourself, Stuart, if you were to kind of summarise who you are, what you do, just in a quick, brief little kind of intro, take it away.
Sure. I am one of many different football writers. There are numerous of us around the Premier League and within individual fan bases. Basically, I'm someone with a bit too much time on the hands, a bit too much of a thesaurus dictionary, and just loves football. That's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like, we're the same. We're just very niche in the sense of it's like our football club. But yeah, I mean, I've read your bio on Pitch Publishing, and like that bio kind of seemed to sum you up in a couple of sentences. Just like lives, breathes football. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Going all the way back then, going like as far back as you can remember, what was your childhood like growing up, in terms of football and things like that? How did it get started?
Well, in the book itself that we're going to talk about later on, there is a brief discussion of this at the very start of it, which is I didn't fall in love with football when I was younger. I didn't have that connection. I wasn't going to games. Ironically enough, my father stopped following what is my local team, his local team, Birmingham City, in the late 80s because he thought it was getting too expensive then.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I was like 3, 4, 5, just, and also as well the sort of saturation of it. It wasn't really on TV apart from the FA Cup final and the England game. So I just didn't see it, and I wasn't really any good at it. And as a kid, especially when it's raining, I'm terrible at football. My first touch has still never gotten any better than 30 years later. And yet, I think certain generations and certain moments, and you're blessed. I was into football at this point, but I think Euro 96 has a lot to do with how you get sort of taken hold. And slightly before that, I remember being probably my earliest football memory of watching Liverpool on TV, and they were losing to Brøndby. And I knew who Liverpool were. My dad told me all about the Liverpool teams of the past. And I had no idea who Brøndby were. And I was like, as a kid, I completely lost it. I started crying because I couldn't understand how this team that I'd never heard of were beating this team that I'd been told was so good. And throughout the course of like the mid-90s, it became more and more of a hook. And even though I was never born there, the connection I have with Liverpool Football Club has just grown and grown. And my sort of football philosophy is that the local connections and the connections you have when you go to the ground, that you have with your family, with your friends, is sacrosanct. It's the best you can have, but that doesn't mean you can't make those connections if you want to, and if you're committed enough, and if you appreciate what club folklore means from top to bottom, regardless of who you support. It doesn't matter whether you're at the top or the bottom. You can still make those connections.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing our football club's actually quite good at is that whole community sense. I mean, we interviewed a fella called Yusuf, who he's won Borah Fan of the Year for a few seasons, and he's from London, and he travels all over the country going to home and away games. But that was similar in the sense of he fell in love with the club through that like community feel, through it's that connection, isn't it, with the fan base and with the club as a whole, and that's kind of what kickstarts it all.
Am I alright to jump in here a second? Firstly, I love Yusuf. We love Yusuf. But yeah, I think going off what you were saying, I think especially at Middlesbrough matches, and on social media, you connect with people who because it's the thing at Boro, every fan seems to know everyone, because either you see them around the ground on a match day, you see them on social media, talking about the club, you interact with them there. But I think it's quite a rare thing in football to have, fans all together of a club, like who you feel you don't know them, but you feel as though you know them and you've known them for years. Which is, I know I'm like that at the matches. Like you see the same familiar faces and that, and I think it's just beautiful how football can bring huge groups of people together, and that's just one of the beauties of it, and one of my favourite parts for sure.
I think partly going off what you said as well, you see these people that you might not know their names, their faces. You might have a nickname, they might have a nickname for you, but when you see them at their highest and at their lowest.
Yeah.
When you experience, it's a collective experience, and when you do something really good, you sort of get a real sense of, oh man, we shared that together, regardless of how well you know them. And the same when you lose together, and not everyone might have the same opinions on why you lost or what you should do to move on, but it's those moments that bond, so that when you do have those highs, you can go, we were there from the whole way, and you can connect in the stands, you can connect where you go to meet certain people, or you have connections outside of the club itself. But that's at the heart of it, is you have the shared experiences that you take forward, and either you're fortunate enough to have the balance of more good than bad, but sometimes a couple of good, that's what you strive for the whole time. It doesn't matter, it doesn't erase the bad, but it makes the bad worth it.
Yeah, 100%. There is that band of togetherness.
Sorry, mate.
No, keep going. You go.
I've particularly always been a fan of the quote that I found a couple of years ago, where it's like, football and going to a football match is the place where all your troubles are forgot about for 90 minutes, because everyone's there watching the same thing. They're all supporting the same thing. You're all there for the same reason. And it's just like one big, like, you're just coming together. And I know you touched on it there, Stuart, like people who you don't even know, you just may know their faces. But it's like that shared experience. You're all there for the same reason, and it's a beautiful thing, really. And it's just somewhere where you can go on a Saturday and just kind of let yourself free in a way, and it's lovely. I love it, mate. I can't wait for August to come.
Oh yeah, all this talk is get us to a match like now, definitely. So who would you say then? Quick question. I think this was one of your questions, Matty, but I'm going to steal it actually.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Who is your favourite former and like current footballer, would you say?
My favourite footballer of all time is a player that played for us for like a cup of coffee. He wasn't there very long. He was far past his best. I saw him do one or two incredible, skillful moves, but he was only a bit part player. And that's Jari Litmanen. Old school Ajax from the early 90s, went to Barcelona, was incredibly gifted. And I like those kinds of players that not just are technically proficient, but also the ones that don't quite hit the headlines as much as everyone else. And at the time, he was an absolute legend. And by the time we got him, he was kind of not quite there, and he always had injuries, and he was never really as good as he could have been. If we got him in '95, my word, geez. But
in his prime,
I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for Jari. And obviously then Sammy Hippick, and then after that we had the Finnish connection, sort of all around that time. I think Sammy was probably before Jari as well, just goes to show you ancient memories. As far as now, I think there are a couple of obvious answers. I'll do you one actually. I'll do two actually. One is Bobby Firmino, just for the fact of everything he does, everything he gives, and that smile. I don't know if this is true, but I did read that when he went to the dentist, they actually created a setting for that grin. And if I ever win the lottery, I'm going to get the Bobby Firmino setting.
No way. So people can go in and request
a
Bobby Firmino smile.
As far again, take everything you read on the internet with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
And also as well, this is just harking to my age. Trent is in his early 20s now. If he doesn't leave Liverpool, by the time he retires, I'll be nearly 50. And I'm just looking at that now, and I'm sitting here going,
yeah,
that's scary shit, that is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you talk about the players you see throughout your life, and you can't take anything for granted. Players come and players go, and there are players. I'll take Salah as a perfect example. I don't think I'll ever see a better goal scorer than him in my life, and I think it's impossible for him to become Liverpool's best ever goal scorer, because I think he has to go at 40th season for the next 10 years to beat Ian Rush.
Yeah,
it could easily be number 2. And if I could see the second best all-time goal scorer in our history, I'll take that. But to have that, it requires him to stay. Whereas in Trent, I think I'm more likely to see that span of career and that growth of from now to then. And I look at what he's won already and what he could win. He's nearly the top assister in Premier League already, and that's at 23. Like, what could he do by the time he's 33?
Yeah. Trent's. I've always said Trent's an absolutely phenomenal player, and it adds to that, that heart thing. Like, he's obviously a local lad. He's from Liverpool, grew up supporting the team, and it's kind of like a fairy tale story for him. And watching him play, he's amazingly talented at what he does, and I love him. But like as for me, I'm only 17, so that I haven't really seen what Middlesbrough were like in their prime, so to speak, like my dad and my granddad did back in the day.
Got the worst years.
Well, yeah, but but yeah, I think like just hearing stories off my granddad and like off my dad of when they used to go to Ayrton Park and like all the the good old days, as my granddad calls them, like just thinking like, wow, like if I was alive for that, like it would have been amazing. And obviously we've got the power of the internet now, we can see stuff and everything, but I just think that like those people were extremely lucky, and like especially for us like younger people coming in to like learn about the past is something, especially of like the club that you love, is something that I've always found really interesting. I've got a few books in there as well. I just love going through them, looking at how Borah did back in the day. And as you said there, I think that different generations come through seeing different players, and it leaves that lasting memory of, like as you said there, Mo Salah, having that lasting memory on you. It's football's a generational thing, and I totally agree with you on what you were saying about Salah as well. I've seen him up close live, and let's just say my breath was taken away. He is a phenomenal player.
I think just going off the back of that, the book itself is so rewarding for me doing it in the process, and forget it coming out or anything like that, but because of the fact that I got to do that not just for yourselves, but for every club that's ever played in the Premier League. This is covering all of them. Some of them only get covered briefly. Some of them are sort of, you're limited by the fact that they either only played one season, or the selection of players that you could have chose that represented those clubs weren't necessarily like a giant list. There was only a couple you could have, and they would impact who else you would choose. But for Middlesbrough, for example, there's an absolute plethora of players to go back through from the history of the club, from the first couple of seasons to the late 90s, and onwards through the sort of Gareth Southgate, Steve McLaren years.
There's definitely plenty to get into there. And I know just before we get into the book, Mai was going to ask you a little bit about your history, like your journey, weren't you, Mai?
I said to you before, I'm and always will be a terrible footballer. Unfortunately, that is my cross to bear.
You and me both, mate, dog.
And so from an early age, it was never going to be that dream of lifting the FA Cup or winning the Premier League title. It was always going to be, I love the game, but what can I do? And when I've written comics when I was younger. I wrote novels when I was 17, and I did blogging when blogging was a thing. And I wrote a couple of pieces. I was fortunate enough way back in 2012 to like have a few pieces of mine appear on the official Liverpool website, and that was that was almost like a dream come true.
That's big.
That's amazing.
Especially for a club that you were really passionate about as well at the time. Yeah, that's amazing. So well done to you for that as well.
Yeah, it was right at the time where I thought, okay, I'm going to go and do this. And I went to coach abroad because I can't play. So I'll coach. It was only a voluntary position. Okay. It was only for the summer of 2012. And I think Matthew said it earlier about the language of football and being able to connect everyone. And I was dealing with these kids that couldn't speak a lick of English, but they knew football. Yeah. So they knew, I could communicate with them in a way that I couldn't verbally.
Yeah.
And they understood me because they would understand different words, like player names and terms of football that are universal. And football is a universal language, I am a footballing romantic deep down at heart. I believe that. And so life sort of gets in the way when you're about 20 to 30. You have to do things like pay the bills. So I've done that.
Yeah.
But also, always on the side, I had a blog and a website, and I was doing what I could. And as all good ideas start, this started with a few drinks. I don't know if either of you have seen the film Memento.
I haven't seen that.
No.
It's one of Christopher Nolan's early films, and the film is played backwards. It's every scene from the end to the beginning.
Right.
And I got in my head this weird concept of Prememento, which was the Premier League done backwards. So you start off with the end of the season, and it's like a predictive podcast where you talk about what's going to happen. And as you work your way back, it becomes into the middle where you talk about what's going on right now. And then towards the end of the season, you're talking about the games that were in the first couple of weeks and how influential they were.
That's an interesting idea. That
is a very off-it concept.
Yeah, it was great. And as a one-off, it was fine. But then by the time we did a one-off, I wanted to do a two-off, and I wanted to do a 3 series and a 4 series. The second series, we did the seasons. We went from what was the current season to 1992, 1993, all the way back. And then right when you thought I couldn't stretch this concept anymore, we thought about players and telling the stories of the players. Now, in the book, they're told mostly in a sort of linear format, but some of them, because of the stories they are told where there's a bit of jump over here to there. In the podcast, they were all told backwards.
Yeah.
And we gave ourselves an idea, I say we, it's me and my friends, and this sort of blog website that became something else. And obviously the books come from that, so we've had to put it all on pause right now. And the conceit we had was to cover every team. And I'm very, very fortunate that since the book was signed and sealed and done, that Luton didn't get promoted and ruin this whole thing altogether, because every team that's ever been, but they were new. So thankfully, Huddersfield did us the business there. And so the book is, excuse me, let me clear my throat. So the book is every club that's ever been in the Premier League, every era and every position. There are different players, goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, forwards, from across the course of the last 30 years. I was quite fortunate enough in this period, as the book's coming out, caps 30 years in the Premier League as well. That's completely unintentional, but it works.
Yeah, no, 100%, because you could go on forever, couldn't you? You just keep going. Yeah, especially, like you said, there's even 30 years ago, and you're going into, like 70s, 80s, like all that football.
It's just a nice little neat bow to put it on. I think in the book itself, one of the things I want to be clear on is the football didn't start in 1992. That's a joke. That's something that you can take the piss out of a little bit. But and the book as well, some of it does delve into things that happened before the Premier League started, but that's only if it's relevant to the actual club itself. But 30 years is, if you tried to do the whole of English football, you would, I don't know who you'd pick. You would be very capped in that regard. But for this, it was concise, it worked, and hopefully everyone reads it and thinks it's amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I'm looking forward to giving it an order and giving it a read. Definitely, because I think, to be fair, like Matty was saying earlier, there's, like, I'm 21, like you said, Matty's 17, so a large section of that book, we'd like learn a thing or two as well. There's plenty that we'd pick up, and players that we genuinely might not have heard of. We probably will have, but not like done that much research into. And then you learn a thing or two, or then it sparks your interest in this, that, and the other. And like you say, looking a bit more into players and finding out more history. So yeah, definitely looking forward to grabbing myself a copy and giving that a read.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of, like, just before your book, before you decided to write it, how long, or how did you really like get into actual writing? And because I know you touched on it a bit there, but like, when was there a transition at all as to when you could you do it full time, or was it just something that you carried on the side? Or
it's something that I would love to do, and over the course of the process of writing this book, I think there were two distinct periods whereby most of these players I've already done a podcast for, so I've already done the research. I know what their stories are, and I know where the points that I want to hit are. I don't want this book to be just solid numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's more of an emotional. We talked about connections between the fans and the players. I think that's what I wanted it to be, but that doesn't mean there aren't numbers in there.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted it to be sort of from a fan's perspective. I wanted to try and look at it from a perspective of. We talked before about who I support, but it doesn't matter who I support. I try to look at this from as neutral a perspective as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But there are maybe one or two paragraphs where something might come through there. I'm thinking of specifically a Man United player and a Chelsea player. But like I say, for the most part, I've tried to keep my hands on the neutral gear as much as possible.
Yeah.
And the writing process was fascinating in a sense that I tried as much to rely on things that either were key to their development or why these players are important for any given reason. I'll give you an example. Gunnar Harlow, he played for Oldham way back in the day. He also played for Leeds and played for Bradford. So he covers 3 different clubs. Those aren't the only times those clubs are mentioned, but just in fact, I think they are the only time Oldham and Bradford are mentioned twice. That's fine. But the key part of this is that he was one of the few foreign players when the Premier League first started. On the opening day, 1992-93, there were 13 foreign-based players in the Premier League.
Oh,
and now you transition that to now.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think during the writing process, it was, like I say, it was not just learning about football. It was learning about the things that you would, because I said to you before, I didn't really get involved until the mid-90s. So all the earlier stuff was really fascinating to me. And it's that learning process and really delving into not just each club and each player, but the stories of both and why they're significant.
Yeah, and I think it's super interesting as well, because I know this was, one of the main things as well that kind of attracted us to like doing this interview as well was, them bits that you're talking about in the book, and you're talking about that transition from, being 13 international players, to then transitioning over time to, like you said, the amount that we have now. I mean, Man City probably have double that, do you know what I mean? Triple, whatever. And that's just on the bench. But I remember mid-90s was actually when Boro were going through a transition, and that was when we kind of kick-started that, especially in the Premier League. We were like one of the turning points to kind of bring in that style of football, and basically telling English teams, like, there's players abroad that are willing to come over here and play good football and get involved. And there's a book called You're Joking, Aren't You? And that covers Juninho and his journey, but it talks as well about Ravanelli coming over as well, and Emerson, and the fees that we were paying for these players abroad. It was kind of like unheard of. And if we didn't get relegated that season after reaching 2 cup finals and still getting relegated, then there's an argument to suggest there that the business that we were doing, we'd have kept up with some of them top teams and kind of kicked on a little bit.
There's another it's bittersweet, if anything, actually, caveat to that, which is to say that Middlesbrough go down, but I can say as a neutral, everybody loved Juninho. Everybody was jealous.
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of, you've got the teams that win at the top. You've got the teams that do get relegated, unfortunately. But you've got this block in the middle, and it's all about if football is about winning and nothing else, there's 16 teams in the Premier League that are doing absolutely nothing. And I think, it's better to have those connections with the players, even if it ultimately falls on its face. Because in football, if you stand still, you're dead. And at Middlesbrough, at least at that time, they moved in a direction. It's just unfortunate that direction turned out to be the wrong one. You can't know that when you do it. It's better to try than not.
Oh, of course, because, I mean, the stories that have come out of that and the players that, like, our local area got to see right on the doorstep was unbelievable. And, like you said, to make 2 cup finals in a season and still get relegated, like, people will still look back at that season and talk about it for years to come. even though it didn't like necessarily bring success in the sense of winning a trophy or like winning the league and whatever. And like you say, that connection that was built again with the fans, and the ambition that was kind of set was, like you said, it puts it on another level.
Yeah, I think that like with Middlesbrough, I think if you went down south and asked any neutral, oh, what do you know about Middlesbrough? I guarantee the word Juninho will come out of their mouth at some point.
Yeah.
Like, and particularly like players like, as you said, Juninho, Ravanelli, Emerson, just that whole era is probably one that most neutrals and football fans remember about our club, because we were obviously bringing in Juninho, who at the time was one of the best players that we had ever seen. I think he won the Premier League Player of the Season. I think he's the only person to ever win Premier League Player of the Season, and the team gets relegated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that the other day.
Yeah, and that just, and I think I've seen videos and everything. So when Sky Sports used to do their like little mini documentaries about like Premier League icons, and
Sky
stuff.
Sports Retro and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like with that particular program about Juninho, just seeing the amount of fans that would turn up in, the Brazil face paint, the Brazilian flags, and, even like people who don't even necessarily support Middlesbrough, who were still saying, oh, this guy's a special player. And like, I think even now, like, as I already said, like, if you went to ask any neutral, what do you know about Middlesbrough? What do you remember about Middlesbrough? The chances are they're going to say that was just an amazing era for us in general. And players like that, obviously attracting headlines and that as well, brought a huge amount of publicity to our club. And I've seen a lot of people actually saying that, like, they actually, I've never seen this on Twitter, but they were all coming in the other day, basically seeing loads of like neutrals saying, oh no, I actually have a lot of respect for Middlesbrough. I actually like Middlesbrough as a club. And I'm thinking, oh wow. Because like, I've never, obviously being a Middlesbrough fan, I've never seen like neutral like perspectives before, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to see people saying, oh, I like your club. And I was like, oh, that's nice. It's like, instead of having angry Twitter rants at our fans all the time.
On social media, that's very much the preferred method of trying to get your message across. Just
football Twitter is just beautiful.
Yes, I agree.
It's this weird kind of third world. It's like good and bad mixed into one, but somehow like satisfying to read and to like you see all the conversations that are going on.
Seeing like, look, everyone's got different opinions, and you see some of them, and like you just see like people coming back with the funniest of responses, and everything. But moving on from that, I've got a question for you, Stuart. I am 17. Obviously, I'm hoping to go to university next year once I finish college and everything, and I really want to go forth and study, sports journalism and all of that stuff, because it's just something that I'm really passionate about. Obviously, I'm here doing this now, but I was just wondering if you've got any advice or any sort of like tricks of the trade you've like picked up over the years that you could give to like me and any other like aspiring sports journalists and writers out there.
As someone that's not done a single paid day of it, any advice I could give would be terrible. But what you can do is you could listen to what I'm saying and do the opposite. So, like, just get it done that way. You're doing this, first of all, which is perfect. Get involved as early and as quickly as possible. I sort of jumped on it a little, perhaps too late. And, I've got the love for it. I'll still do it. But in terms of trying to pursue it, having that portfolio of work, you can reach the kinds of audiences that I would never have been able to do when I was your age. And doing the work, putting it in, and this kind of thing, and trying to expand and grow, and also challenge yourself in terms of not just this, but with writing as well, and what you can do from any sort of perspective, and also just get involved with as much in terms of like grassroots level, the ones that will give you the opportunities. It's a very closed door football, and I speak not through bitterness, but just through the fact of so many people want to do it. And if you've not got the passion for the game, you're probably not going to be able to sit through rejection after rejection or closed door after closed door. And this is the thing that people don't necessarily understand. I've done some voluntary work before, and that can be quite draining. And you think to yourself, oh, football, it's this great job with working and following the beautiful game. But like when you've got to get up at X in the morning, you've got to travel to an away game, or you've got to do a big long train journey when you're absolutely knackered, and you just think to yourself, you don't get home till it's not quite like going to the game, because in this, at least you're trying to contribute to your career, but it's not as perfect as it's always going to be from the outset. And that you need that passion to see it through, and if you can show that, and if you can do that, then people will see and take chances, and that's how you open those doors that I suggested.
Yeah, and like especially for me, like I remember my mum telling me, I've always said since I was about 8, TalkSport, I want to be on TalkSport, because I used to listen to it. I still listen to it now every night. I just lay in bed and listen to it. And like, because I prefer talking, and like I like writing as well.
Yeah.
But I prefer talking about it, because I can go on for ages, and like and I think I do have that passion for it. But I think that like especially wanting to go down that route, and as you said, there's a lot of closed doors, and I've heard this before. A few other people who I've talked to, you have to be prepared for the closed doors and the rejection. But like if you've got the passion for the game and you really want to do it, they'll do nothing but just make you stronger. And like you will, and if you've got the passion for it, you'll go forth, and you'll chances are you'll do pretty well in it. But you've got to have I totally agree with it. You've got to have the passion, you've got to have the drive, and you've got to have the resilience as well. I think resilience is a huge part of it as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, we interviewed Phil Spencer from TalkSport last week.
I need to get his book. I've seen it a few times, and it's on my wish list.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm just over halfway through it, and it's a brilliant read. But he said the same thing last week. He was talking about the resilience and kind of having that bit of toughness about you to kind of accept the no's and go forward and just go, well, I'll put myself out there, and if someone says no, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't happen. Like, I just move on to the next one and go again, and maybe get another no. And if I get another no, then I move on to the next one, and just
those
keep going.
no's aren't ever permanent no's either.
Exactly.
They're no's for right now.
Yeah, exactly. That is very, very good advice. So, Stuart, in writing the book, what would you say was your favourite part about writing the book, and the most challenging part throughout?
Well, I think I've already touched upon the learning aspect of it, and sort of going into the histories of other clubs and maybe parts of the Premier League at the very start that I wasn't as familiar with. But that also does lean into the parts of it that weren't as nice, because I've got like a certain one count in mind, and I've got a certain amount of things I need to cover, and certain seasons like you can't cover when you've got already through, and you're 3,000 words deep on Aurelio Gomez. There's only so much you can fit in after that.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, that football is so filled with connective tissue that you can get from Aurelio Gomez and the problems that he had at Tottenham to the emergence of Gareth Bale, because it happened in one game where they went 3-0 down, 4-0 down even to Inter Milan. Bale can't quite bring it back, but it was Gomez getting sent off in that game that sort of set his career back at Spurs, and almost ultimately, I think, may have ended it really effectively. That he'd gone through some ups and downs, and he was never really trusted again after that. But you just think to yourself, the Venn diagram of Tottenham history at that time, Gomez and Bale, you wouldn't think would be that closely connected.
Yeah.
But there's so much of it, so that you have to be very careful with what you pick and choose to use. And the writing process, as I got toward the end of it, it was very much like there are certain paragraphs and certain chapters and certain players, maybe not players so much, but certain swings that I wanted to take, certain bigger hits that I'm not sure if there was either the time nor the delicacy, because there's so much to touch upon. The last thing you want to do, especially when you're talking about clubs that have a particular event that might, evoke certain emotions, I don't want to tread upon that, and I don't want to like ruin a legacy by being either like there's a chapter about a Leeds player and about what happened in 1999 in Turkey, and I just it's a sharp turn of tonally, you have to be very careful. And I want to give Leeds the most respect in the world for everything that went on there.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to be as respectful as I can to the material while also trying to tell a football thing. And it's just some of those particular, I need to have it in there.
Yeah.
Out of respect for everything that happened. And at the same time, it's like, how do you go from that to, and they won, they tried to win football games. So some of it, when you want to go and you need to include those moments, it's difficult to change track and it's difficult to get the tone spot on. And I really do hope that anyone that reads either that or there's a couple of other bits in there that touch upon certain emotional aspects of, I think there's a huge chapter in there. And I was very aware that, and this is not club specific, this is across the board. COVID, obviously a big deal in football history and Premier League history in terms of how it affected not just the fans being not in the pit, being not in the stands rather, but also everyone on a personal level.
Yeah.
And while trying to go through what happened from, there weren't fans in the stands, so X team couldn't celebrate as much as they would have perhaps liked, to it doesn't matter, but it does matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And football is very simple. Life is complicated. And I think that's how the book tried. I'm trying to look at it from a particular lens of looking at the game itself, but the game becomes bigger than that. And there are big themes in there that are tackled. Yeah.
Like you said, I think it's a balancing act, isn't it? Like you say, it's getting that balance right. And I think if you can get that right, then you'll be fine. And I think people that are reading it will kind of recognise that after listening to this also. But Ben, was and Matty, sorry, was there a couple of other questions that you had?
Obviously, you've obviously wrote about every Premier League club in this book, which I must congratulate her upon, because that must have taken a lot of time. Obviously, like, we're a Borah fan channel, so it would be a shame for me if I didn't ask you the question: who is your favourite Borah player of all time, and are there any particular Middlesbrough moments that stand out to you as being quite, significant?
I think the UEFA Cup run will always stick out to me.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't want to talk to cliches, because Juninho's such a good and obvious answer. I always had a weird sort of thing for Chris Riggett and Malcolm Christie.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
That's interesting.
I think when they played for Derby as well, there was that weird sort of synergy there. And I also I had a weird story where I went to the Riverside on a whim because a friend of mine who was a Birmingham City supporter couldn't go, and I was phoned up at 3:00 in the morning going, "Do you want to get up in 4 hours and go to Middlesbrough?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in." I was 19 at the time. And it turned out to be one of the most ridiculous games of football I've seen in a while. It was Middlesbrough 5, Birmingham City 3, and including, and this is a great one, do you know when you see a player take a shot and you go, "That's never going in a million years," and you give it the big one, you won't care. Massimo Macaroni on the edge of the box. It would have been, he's playing towards the left, I'm looking at him on the right. He's hit a shot that I'm convinced is going so far wide. Yeah. And it just, at the last second, just dips into the corner. Yeah. And me and my mate just looked at each other and went, we're right behind the goal. I was like, that was fucking incredible. One of the best finishes I've ever seen. He absolutely caught us out because we were fully prepared to abuse him.
It sounds.
Yeah, it's one of the things I don't like when I'm sat there watching a football game. It looks like a shot's going one way, and it's sort of like an optical illusion. It ends up coming even back over on itself. It looks like it's going forward, but it ends up coming back in. You're like, how the hell's that happened then? But this is one, because I've celebrated a goal that was going in a complete other opposite direction once, and I look like a right mug. So I'll
do that to you any day now. Like every single time, you have to be very careful.
Don't get me started on VAR. I'll be here for hours. Did you touch on VAR in the book and like how that sort of like impacted the rules and how football's like perceived in terms of the officiating point of view?
Yeah, there is a really interesting caveat. And when I said to you about what you've got to fit into the book, obviously there would need to be a passage about that. And if you're familiar with this already, then kudos, because this is something that's like deep cuts in the Premier League. But and this is what the book is full of. Alexander Zinchenko has the record. He's one of the Man City players in this book, and it's a very unique choice to make. And he's in there because he has the longest winning streak of any player from their debut, like full stop. He won, I think it was 22 straight games in a row in a Man City shirt.
Oh.
And the 23rd was Spurs at the Etihad, I believe. And Manchester City were about to win that when a goal was ruled out by VAR. And it would have, that's the game that broke the streak. And it was a very early use of VAR, and it was questionable because I think there were a couple of other questionable calls in that game. And it was sort of, you know, this is the future now. It's fixed itself a little in that we don't get very many armpit offsides as we used to.
Yeah.
But some of the subjective stuff, and unfortunately, ultimately, it is in the hands of the referees. And as we've found out on a weekly basis, they are inept to a man.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So do you
I mean,
feel like... Sorry, mate.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say it's an interesting question because obviously we were just talking about players and clubs, but looking at the officiating as a whole and how much that'll have changed over 30 years. I mean, look at how far technology's come in 30 years. Like, so to pair that then, I mean, can you imagine being a referee 30 years ago and someone like telling you from now, this is what there's going to be in place. There's going to be this little box that you run over to at the side of the pitch and it plays you a replay of like what's just happened and then you decide from there.
I can imagine many a Roy Keane tackle being studied by VAR.
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, it's funny that because I was very fortunate enough to talk to when we did the podcast series, which was about 3 years ago now. So some of this, if you do ever go back and listen to it, some of it's not even as up to date as the book is. Players get more things added to them. And I was fortunate enough to talk to Rick Holder, who used to play for Oldham. Right. And one of the things we asked them is when the Premier League came in, was it different or was it just literally a name change? Because it takes about 3-4 years to feel any different from the old Division 1. Yeah. And I like to think about the Premier League as in like a sort of, we talked earlier about cycles, about generational cycles, but eras are a very big part of football. In the 60s and the 70s, you'd have dominant teams that would quote unquote rule the decade. And in the 90s, you had Manchester United. And that first 10 years of the Premier League are vastly far away from what we've got now. And I do think maybe Man City to a lesser degree, and maybe they'll go on to prove me wrong. But I don't think you can have eras in this particular period of time because football moves too quickly. When you get to 2005, it's just an absolute like foot down on the pedal and things change so fast. I remember Chelsea under Abramovich in those first couple of years, people thought that they would be unbeatable. People thought they would be winning Premier Leagues for years and years to come. And people think that about Man City now, and people will unfortunately probably think that about Newcastle in about 5-10 years' time. Yeah. Football changes. It just changes.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it before where we think, like, especially, you know, looking at the money that Newcastle have, like how their fortunes can be changed with, you know, the change of ownership and, like, you know, money that can be brought in, obviously money out of football. But, like, looking at teams like Newcastle who, going back 2 years ago, even when they were in the Championship a few years ago when they had that little dip, like, you wouldn't think that they would be the richest club in the world as they are now. And they've got that money now, and I think we've touched on it before, Jordan. You know, it's theirs to lose with it. I can honestly say I don't mind Newcastle. Sorry to any Middlesbrough fans who are going to come at me for saying that, but I don't actually mind Newcastle, and I think honestly, if they use their money in the right way, they will honestly be quite a team to be reckoned with. But obviously, give it a few years. Obviously, not like straight away.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Money is the guarantee. You have to make it wisely. And Man City had to go through their teething problems as well. They had to go through a couple of years where they were challenging Champions League with Spurs, and it took them, I think it was 3-4 years that they went through sort of almost two separate editions of Man City with money. They had the first initial ownership burst that brought them like the Robinhos and the Craig Bellamy's and, the Rocco Santa Cruz of the world, and then the Guardiola era, which is just that on an unbelievable high level.
Yeah, well, and like you say, them cycles again. It's them like you say, that small bit, like that injection of money, and like you say, there was the first injection, which was one cycle, and then you've got like the Mancini as the second
Yeah.
cycle, and then, like you say, transition to Guardiola, and even him in his time at
Or the
City,
oil money era, as I like to call it.
yeah. Even the Guardiola cycle now, there's been like little mini ones in between
He's
where
kind of built two teams. There's the
essentially,
Aguero Silva company, and now you've got the Foden, Grealish to a lesser degree.
yeah.
That team basically.
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, for them first few years, you struggled to get the keeper right, struggled to get the defenders. I mean, didn't they spent crazy money on defenders, didn't they? So
Fullbacks to the bajillion.
yeah.
Yeah, now you've got
Shows.
you've got players in there like João Cancelo, Ruben Diaz, who, you could look at and arguably say are some of the best defenders in the league, if not, even, more than that. But obviously, Stuart, money is now a categorical part of football.
Yeah.
And obviously you see these ridiculous transfer fees that, if they were back in the day, I'm sure many people would have probably had heart failures.
There was a breakdown of one of the chapters is a breakdown of how the transfer scenario got out of control.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about that. In your opinion, do you think that money has sort of taken over? I don't want to say the fun of football, but I think you kind of get what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
How big do you think money's become in football? And I was going to ask you, but you just said, did you touch on it in the book as well?
I don't know if either of you two know the name Adi Akinbaye. You might know him by proxy of the joke that he became. Just almost like a meme before memes existed. And he went for, I think it was 5-6 million in the end. But at the time, it was astronomical money. And the issue you've got is when you get to a certain level, the numbers don't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And we're well beyond that now.
Yeah.
I do think it takes a little away from the romance of it a little. I mean, Liverpool themselves are being criticised for spending X amount of money. I can turn around and say, well, we're raising that by selling players. But even that, it doesn't, it's not quite the same as a Leicester winning it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I mean, yeah.
I think what money allows you is a second chance. Man United can fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. But because they've got the commercial sort of superpower that they are, they're allowed to go again. And they only need to get it right once. And so at smaller sides, I'll take a random example here. Like Swansea got everything right for about 10 years straight. All their signings, all their managerial choices. And then they made like one or two bad decisions and they were back out.
Yeah.
That's what money will allow you to correct very quickly. Whereas the sides that don't have it are sort of chained to being able to spend it in one way and one way only. And if they get it wrong, they don't really get a second chance.
Yeah, I mean, I can use Borah as a perfect example of that. I mean, in the last 10 years, going from I don't know, we'll go from the year Karanka came in, and Karanka came in, took over from Tony Mowbray. It pushes up to 12th. The following season, we got all the transfers right, but very astute signings. Lee Tomlin for a couple of million from Peterborough. Bamford on loan goes on to score
Vossen.
like 22 goals. Jelle Vossen. So the signings at that point are right. You go again the next season, the commercial side, the money that we made from the previous season, plus a little injection that next cycle. The signings were brilliant. The signings, we spent a little bit more money. We brought the likes of Stuart Downing back, David Nugent, Jordan Rhodes, Gaston Ramirez on loan. A few big name signings that kind of then took us to that next level. That then seals promotion on the final day. Then we go up. The signings that we make, you're thinking, bloody hell, we've got Victor Valdez, Alvaro Negredo, signing these big players. You're thinking, like, we're going, we could be challenging for Europe with this bloody squad. And then we're
not going to talk about what eventually happened.
No, the dressing room's not right. The dressing room's not right. I think that was the season that Burnley with Jeff Hendrick in the middle and like Ben Mee at the back got Europe and we got relegated. It's just mind-blowing. But then the season afterwards, we've got all this money from going down, obviously the parachute payments, and we signed Britta Sambalonga, Cyrus Christie, all these players that on paper, without a doubt, we had the best player in every position. And we must have spent about 45 to 50 million that summer. We didn't get it right. We didn't go up. And what ultimately happened is that one summer set us back another 5-6 years. And we're only just now seeing...
We're still there now, yeah.
Yeah, we're only just seeing this next cycle with, young players coming through that are then going to be bought for a lot more, like Jed Spence, that's going to enable a good manager like Chris Wilder to then build a squad. But like that example there of these little cycles, it's when you really cut it down like you have, and obviously like micromanaged all these different teams, and you look at the cycles, it is interesting how like every 5 years or so you see this different side almost.
It's the joy of it as well is also the what ifs that exist within the Premier League history.
Yeah.
I, to my shame, didn't know this before I started writing the book, but Man United's first ever victory in the Premier League was, I think, it's a 1-0 away victory. I want to say QPR, but I could be wrong. So it's just a 1-0 away victory. And Dion Dublin scored the winner. And Dion Dublin, I mean, his history at Man United is effectively goes up. There's another what if there, because he was in the playoff final with Cambridge. Blackburn beat them, go up. There's already about 10 different spirals there.
Yeah.
Alan Shearer doesn't go to Man United.
Yeah.
They get Dublin instead.
Yeah.
And he breaks his leg and they replace him with Eric Cantona. So within that little 5 spell of a couple of months.
Yeah.
There's so
it's
much
mad to think that, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Like even the thought of Alan Shearer at Manchester United is quite a big thought. Like he could, like what could have happened if he actually did?
Yeah, or
like, it's crazy thought.
Like Stuart's just said there, if Dion Dublin doesn't get injured, Eric Cantona never goes to Man U. So, like you said,
crazy thought. It's a crazy thought.
And that's just for one little small period of one club and one player. There's so many more. There's another one of my favourites. I actually think that the ripples in time actually correct and get back to the right timeline here.
Right.
But
okay.
if Claudio Ranieri doesn't go mental against Monaco and go all out attack, and he wins the Champions League rather than Jose Mourinho, Chelsea have the Champions League in 2004. Mourinho, does he go to Chelsea after that? I don't know if you can sack the manager that's just won the Champions League.
Exactly.
I think he probably goes there eventually, or alternatively, maybe he goes to Liverpool.
And then, like you said, who knows what history happens there?
And the history with Chelsea and Liverpool is even more mad, because if you go back a year, there was a game where it was Liverpool-Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. The winner gets Champions League football, and by all accounts, the winner gets bought by Roman Abramovich. We lost that game 2-1. If we'd have won that game, we'd have been in the Champions League, and things would have been very different. For both Gerard Houllier, Liverpool Football Club, the ownership, because Chelsea were on the verge of going, not out of business necessarily, but Ken Bates was in their own real financial trouble. So in terms of those two histories of those two football clubs, vastly different things, determined by one game.
Yeah.
I think
it's mental.
Thinking about some of them, it's like, Jesus, like what if that actually happened? It's like some of the what ifs you can think about in football are just like mad.
Before I carry on, I'll do my favourite one, because this is in the book, and this is it's one of my favourite matches, and it's such a low key match. At the end of the 2004-05 season, Wigan played Sheffield United. I need to be very clear on that. At Sheffield United. Sheffield United, in the run-up to this game, Neil Warnock had been very critical of Manchester United and Liverpool for resting players against their relegation rivals. Liverpool were going to a Champions League final. Man United had already wrapped the league up. As it boiled down, Sheffield United needed to beat Wigan at home to stay up. They lost 1-0. David Unsworth scored a penalty that day. And David Unsworth, the reason why this is fascinating, the reason why this is amazing, is because David Unsworth, playing for Wigan on that day, was released by Sheffield United 6 months earlier.
Whoa.
No way.
And Warnock in there as well, gee.
You couldn't write it. You actually couldn't write it.
It's such a perfect script.
Yeah, it literally is. It is.
I can only imagine the words Warnock said in that dressing room after that.
Yeah,
there's another little beautiful little snide to that, which is that David Unsworth missed, I think, 2 penalties in his entire career. One of them for Sheffield United earlier on in that season.
Just shows, doesn't it? It just shows. And if he scored that, who's to say they wouldn't have needed the points?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The football is beautiful for these kind of things, and that's why
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could, like you said, it's endless. You could just keep going and find.
We could be here for hours alone just talking about this stuff.
Easily. Was there any more questions that you had, Matty?
No, I think I've covered everything now. I'll just ask, like, obviously a lot of the stuff he's mentioned about his book. It sounds like a really, really interesting read. I'm going to make sure to read it.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, one last thing, Stuart. Did you find that, like, you're sort of like obviously you said you had to try and remain from a neutral point of view, but like, did you let your, like, obviously every football fan has their opinions on teams. Like, I've made it very vocal that I don't like Man City on Twitter and, like, you know, and everything. But like, is it? I know you already touched on this earlier, but like, would you say, is it hard for you to sort of like keep the, you know, like, obviously Liverpool, if like you may not like Man United and everything, like, obviously you have to like cater for all audiences, so to speak. Did you find that sort of like difficult, and like in the back of your head you're thinking, I don't want to be saying nice things about Manchester United, but like, is it sort of something that you have to be careful with, like when you talk, like in order not to like upset fans and stuff?
There's a couple of things here, which is to say that if I came at it from my angle of, I'm going to say what my opinion is. My opinion, you know, individual opinions aren't really, you know, they don't mean a lot. As much as Twitter would have you, you know, believe the opposite, but just what my opinion on Wayne Rooney is means not a jot. Wayne Rooney is the opening chapter of the book, and I put him in very specifically for this reason. One, he is, I think, still just about England's all-time top goal scorer. Harry Kane will.
He will.
Hopefully not before the book comes out. So if he gets a hat-trick tomorrow, I'll be furious. Also, he's Manchester United's all-time top goal scorer. I grew up with him being kind of the bane of my existence. He's an Everton and Man United legend. He is the opposite of me personified. Because he's good at football as well. He's literally the opposite of me. And I come at it from a perspective of, I'm not the perfect person to write about him, but in a way, if I can write good things about him, then that means he must be really good.
Yeah.
And I think he's, for someone that is the accolades that I just mentioned, his place in history is very odd, because he's not seen as an all-time great in terms of the way that other strikers of the past are, despite the fact of what he's done and what he won and what he did, and the unbelievable technical ability that when you go back, I think partly because of obviously managing to win the league, I think some of those demons have been slightly more exercised. And I think on the whole, if we were still waiting for that, maybe a little bit more bitterness would have come out, but I don't know. Yeah. In terms of going back and looking at these demons that I used to have of watching old Man United footage, so I can look at it now from a perspective of appreciating the actual talent that the guy had. And I could have probably done it back then, but when you're in the moment, when you're in the quote unquote heat of the battle, you can't quite see it. I think the other thing as well is there are a couple of chapters about, I mentioned Zinchenko first. I'll take that as a perfect example. Zinchenko's in there because of the streak and how fascinated I am. And if I put Man City down, I don't necessarily agree with either Guardiola going all out and mentioning us any chance he gets, or some of the other things in terms of how they got to the way that where they are right now for the money. That's all well and good. But if I deny how good they are right now, I'm putting us down.
Yeah.
I think they are the second best team in Europe. And I know that that's a joke. I'm damning with faint praise there. I think that the current the current Man City team would beat arguably any previous Premier League team, or whoever. And so it would be foolish of me to put them down. And like I say, I can look at it from a sort of fresh perspective, having gotten everything I needed out of the Premier League over the last couple of years. But if I can look at Wayne, I think when Gary Neville mentions something about Liverpool in a positive light, you know from where that compliment comes. He's begrudging, but it means a lot more. So for him having to say it, then it's great. And that's the sort of way I was looking at. I don't think football commentary should be neutral, because at the end of the day, who is actually neutral?
Yeah.
Yeah. We all support a team, really.
Yeah.
And we all have our opinions, but I've always thought that, like, especially with commentators and stuff, because obviously you've got fans of both teams watching at home and stuff. You have to like remain neutral and everything. But I think I do agree with the fact that it sort of like puts a cover over like your club and like who you support and what your opinions of football are. And like obviously, as you touched on it there, it's quite sometimes like you have to just go back and look at it and just go like this. Like I know I don't particularly like it, but this was amazing.
Yeah.
Like and like you can't deny like the talent in Man City's squad now. As much as I do not like them, like the talent that they have is phenomenal. So yeah, I think that you've handled that really well.
And where can you pick the book up?
It is available on pre-order now. You can get the Kindle edition. That'll be out on the 20th. So if you want like a good read on the old e-reader, Kindle, that sort of jazz, you can get it on the 20th. If you want it as a hardcover, beautiful on your mantelpiece, it will be available on I think it's the 11th of July on the Monday. It's available from Amazon. It's available from Waterstones, all good books sellers. And also if you go on to my Twitter account, which is @SQ Studios, there's the link there that will send you to all of those retailers.
Yeah.
How big is the book, might I ask? Like how thick is it? Like how many pages and stuff?
336 pages. It is a fair tome. And like your standard sized. If I really wish I had it to hand, but I don't have like it.
I was gonna say
writing about each club. Like, I was gonna say, considering you're writing about each club, and as you said, you've got chapters about Rooney, you've got bits about Zinchenko, whatever. Like
45 different players, and each chapter is between 2,000 and 3,000 words long.
Yeah, like obviously that takes some doing. Like, so we have nothing but respect for you for doing that, because it must have took you a very long time.
Yeah.
The research was fairly easy. Then I wrote it. Then I scrapped it all in December, and I wrote it again in another 3 months.
Oh God.
Whoa.
Yeah, I've got nothing but respect for that.
Yeah,
appreciate 100%.
It. Really. But yeah, we'll leave a link in the descriptions of both the podcast and the YouTube channel, and then obviously we'll share this around as well. But no, thank you very much for your time, Stuart. It's been an absolute blast, and I know that if we had more time, or maybe we can do it again.
We could sit here for hours.
Oh,
we could absolutely sit here for
stories. We really, really would.
We wouldn't go to bed, and for me, getting a bus at 7 o'clock in the morning is very, very catastrophic. So.
Oh yeah, no, I've got the same. We work first thing. This is why I look at this haggard. This is life. This is what happens when you're doing the grind.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I was talking about football all the time, this would be a lot different. This would not be weathered. I'll tell you that much.
It's the same with me if I wasn't doing my A levels at this moment in time. But.
I'll just do it before we go, just quickly. I think I can rattle these off. The Middlesbrough players in the book are, I'll try and do this in order: Jan Åge Fjørtoft, Nick Barmby, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink, Robert Huth. Well, there's one more, and it escapes me. You're gonna have to read the book to find that one.
Genuinely, mystery. You've left us hanging there, Stuart.
That is a plug. If any Borah fan is listening to this or watching this, you have to go and read it now, just to find out who that last player is. Definitely. But yeah, like you say, we'll leave it everywhere, and we'll get that shared. There's not a problem. Maybe we can do this again.
One very, very quick thing before we go. I know I said about the Leeds thing earlier, and I want to correct myself. It was 2000, not 99. I don't want to be that guy, but I tried to make as much sort of it's right in the book. Let's put it
what you've written down will be right.
Yeah, definitely. But no, like I say, thank you very much for your time, Stuart. I really appreciate it. It's
been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this.
It's been a blast, man. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, mate.